Hello everybody and happy Hanukkah. I hope you've had a good festival so far. I know this is the first night of Hanukkah where we say the three blessings and light just a single candle on the Hanukkah. And if you're not familiar with the custom surrounding the Hanukkah, it's basically a menorah with one extra branch on either side. It's an 8-branched menorah. And then, so it has 8 branches, and then it has one additional little candlestick that we call the Shemesh candle. And Shemesh means servant, so the Shemesh candle is the servant candle. And this one is separate from all the rest, and this is the one that's lit first. Then, the person lighting the Hanukkah takes the Shemesh candle and uses it to light all the other candles on the Hanukkah. Now, the Shemesh candle is actually really important because this is a candle that explains to us what it means to truly light the menorah. This candle explains to us that it's service and servanthood, wherein which we are able to light the rest of the candles on the Hanukkah. But, of course, there's an issue because the Shemesh candle is set apart. And the question is, who is the Shemesh candle? Now, many answers have been provided throughout history. Perhaps it's the church. Perhaps it's the Jewish people. But I think for us, we have to say that this Shemesh candle is Jesus. Now, I want to tell you a story about Hanukkah, and I'm going to tell this story over the course of the next 8 days. And to do that, I'm going to use something that I don't think a lot of people connect with the holiday, but we really should, especially as believers, as messianics. It is the Hanukkah sermonette that Jesus gives in John 10. I want to unpack how this sermonette was given on Hanukkah for a specific purpose. Jesus was explaining what this Shemesh candle is. He was explaining what enlightens every reason for our celebration during this season. It is the oil, this Shemesh candle is the oil of sanctification that cleanses the temple. And this is what it represents. And not only this, but as believers, it is the oil that consecrates us for His service. You see, every holiday is explained in one way or another by the great wise men that each of us venerates. Over the course of the centuries, they have taken our celebrations and transformed them from simple times of gladness, parties, and mildly vapid times to eat, drink, and be merry. They've transformed them from a celebration to times in which we can have our heart penetrated by the Lord our God, to times where we connect with the righteous men in ages long past and glean the nuggets of wisdom that they have to offer us. And Jesus, being our Messiah, was the one most important person, the person most qualified to give us this Shemesh candle. He's the one most qualified to enlighten the divine spark and use this to ignite every small miracle that happens in the soul of the elect. You see, one year during Hanukkah in Jerusalem, Jesus was walking in the temple, in the portico of Solomon. So the Jews gathered around him and said to him, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly." And Jesus answered, "I've told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name, they testify to me. But you do not believe, because you do not belong to my sheep. My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. What my Father has given me is greater than all else, and no one can snatch it out of the Father's hand. The Father and I are one. Now, Jesus was very clever. When the Jewish people asked him whether he was the Messiah on the festival of Hanukkah, they were asking a very specific question. Are you the next Judas Maccabeus who will overthrow the oppressive empire? Jesus doesn't avoid the question, although it may seem that he does. Instead, he answers it quite plainly. I am not merely the Messiah, he says, but I am the force behind every Judas Maccabeus. I am that which lights the path towards redemption, the source of the miracles of Hanukkah. Therefore he says, my sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. In this way, he's able to say, I give them eternal life, and they will never perish. Now, the Jewish people in those days, of course, they know the story of Hanukkah. In fact, they have been telling this story and singing the songs during the whole festival. The whole story is about whether you obey God, even in the face of death. When the Seleucids conquered Israel and took it away from the Ptolemaic Empire, they wanted to make sure that every people group in this area would never return to the Ptolemies. And they did a very wise thing. And this was to enforce a policy of assimilation. You will not go back to the Ptolemies if your national identity, language, customs, and religion are all Seleucid. That's how they thought. Therefore, they told every nation in the region to break with the customs of their fathers and adopt the Seleucid culture. But here's the kicker. If you didn't obey them, they will kill you. Of course, many of the Gentile nations around them, they adopted this willingly and without complaint. But in Israel, the people were split. Many unrighteous Jews decided to adopt the Seleucid customs and forsake the covenant of God, the covenant that he made with their fathers. So they would break the Sabbath, eat unclean foods, skip the circumcision of their children, burn Torah scrolls, and desecrate the temple. Meanwhile, righteous Jews would not, under any circumstances, break with these laws. These Jews loved God, and they would never forsake him, even when faced with death. Naturally, the tension grew between the two groups of Jews until the wicked ones decided to alert the Seleucids to the disobedience of their righteous neighbors. The Seleucids, along with these wicked Jews, then began to round up these righteous Jews and put them to death. Men, women, and children. Now, of course, the righteous Jews would defend themselves or run away, but one day they were faced with a dilemma. This day was the Sabbath. You see, in those days, it was not lawful to leave a city on the Sabbath or to pick up stones, throw them, and it was not lawful even to run. So the decision they were faced with was this. Will they break the Sabbath? Will they break the very thing that they are protesting to death for the right to keep? Will they do this in order to save their lives? Or will they keep the Sabbath and die? Now you may think that the answer is simple. Break the Sabbath so that you can live another day. Well, as they were besieged this Sabbath day, the commander that had besieged them demanded that they come out and profane the Sabbath in order for them to demonstrate that they are loyal to Antiochus Epiphanes, the king of the Seleucids, and not to their god, their king. But they said, we will not come out. nor will we do what the king commands, and so profane the Sabbath day." Then the enemy quickly attacked them, but they did not answer or hurl a stone or block up their hiding places, for they said, "Let us all die in our innocence. Heaven and earth testify for us that you are killing us unjustly." And so they attacked them on that Sabbath, and they died, with their wives and children and livestock, to the number of 1,000 persons. And this was a day of great mourning for the righteous Jews who were rebelling against the Hellenizing forces. They tore their clothes, put dust on their head, and they mourned. And then Mattathias, who was the leader of these righteous, rebelling Jews, he desired to save the true Jews everywhere, and he made this ruling: If we all do as our kindred have done, and refuse to fight with the Gentiles for our lives and for our ordinances, they will quickly destroy us from the earth. So they made this decision that day: let us fight against anyone who comes to attack us on the Sabbath day. Let us not all die as our kindred died in their hiding places. Mattathias understood a core principle in the Torah. It was given to produce life in us. And the mandate to protect life even allowed us to break the Sabbath in order to fulfill that obligation. Jesus, understanding this, called the Pharisees out for disallowing the sick to be healed on the Sabbath, and he rebuked them, saying, "Who among you, if your sheep falls in a pit on the Sabbath, will not immediately fish it out?" And Jesus, in his Hanukkah sermonette, is saying the same thing. He's saying, "My sheep know my voice." He is the physical embodiment of righteousness, walking in their midst, understanding every law of God and the core principles behind them, because he is the core principles behind them, and he is saying that he is the way, the truth, and the life. When Mattathias made this declaration, he was given such light by the Shemesh, by the servant of all the candles. And this was to point to the Messiah who, when he comes, he will declare that through him is eternal life. You see, if those Jews died in obedience to the Sabbath, but they didn't believe God could give them eternal life, if they believed that it was all over after they died, then the only reasonable thing to do would have been to run, to break the Sabbath, to save your life. However, they knew that it is better to die in obedience than to live in disobedience. These sheep knew the voice of Christ. At the same time, when Mattathias ruled that God preferred his people to live rather than to die, he also knew the voice of Christ. So Jesus is saying that the reason we celebrate Hanukkah is because he gives us the Sabbath, he gives us rest, not only in this life, but also in the next. He not only gives us life, eternal life in the next world, but he gives us life in this world. So as you look forward to celebrating Hanukkah these next 7 days, I encourage you to rededicate your temple with joy, because Christ died for you, and he has provided the way to eternal life. Chag Sameach.